In this video we are going to create a surface from a survey and contour lines from a survey, which are essentially just polyline features with the elevations associated with them. So here's the example of the drawing we get from the surveyor. As you can see, we have contour lines, major and minor contour lines. I believe these are 1 foot and 5 foot intervals. And you can see other markings, the road center line, fence lines, etc. What we want to do eventually is to combine the surface we create from this survey with our DEM surface to be able to expand upon this survey. So what we want to do first is copy over this file, this drawing, into the drawing we created for our DEM. And a couple things to note here: there's probably other ways to do this, but this is just the way we're going to do it. We want to copy this and be able to set it in the exact location. So we're going to zoom in here to this benchmark, and we want to figure out what are the coordinates of this benchmark. So we'll type ID, and then it says specify point, so we'll snap to that point location, and there it gives us the XY coordinates. So we'll write those down and remember those for later. So for now, what we want to do is come out, zoom out, and highlight this entire drawing, and just hit Control C, and then we'll switch over to our other drawing where we saved our DEM. You can see it here, and we're just going to kind of zoom out. I'll hit Control V, and I've copied it into here. So now we need to be able to move this to the reference point we want. The easiest way I know to do that, we're just going to draw a line. So we're going to go up here to the line feature, but we want to create a line by northing and easting. And so we're going to kind of zoom into the general area where it is. And so we just want to plug those coordinates in again, and this will be the starting point of our line, but essentially we can snap to that as an endpoint. So we'll type in our northing, which is 303.28, hit enter, and our easting is 2436000.73, hit enter. And it asks us to enter another northing and easting. We're just going to hit escape, and then you can see the line here, and we'll just draw it out a little bit. And again, this is just so essentially we can snap to this bottom point. So what we want to do is highlight this entire thing again, and then type in move. But we're going to select the base point to be our benchmark point here. Click on that, zoom back out, and let's go find that line again. And we're going to snap right there, and we can just delete that line. And so now we have our topo map, our polylines, and all that basically in the right geographic location. And one thing I didn't point out in the DEM video is once you turn the settings on and define a coordinate system, you should have this tab pop up, which is a geolocation tab. And especially once you get your surface in, a good check to make sure it's in the right geographic location, you can go up here, click on this, and there's a mapping service. I think this uses Bing Online Maps. You can click Map Aerial, and ideally this should pop up a map behind you. So you can see here's the creek coming in, here's the roadway. I know it's kind of cluttered, but again, it's just a nice helpful reference to be able to use here. One thing to note, you need to obviously be logged on to the internet, and I think you need to be signed into your Autodesk subscription as well to be able to utilize these map services. So we'll turn that off for right now, just to save a little bit of speed on the computer. So now what we want to do is create the surface from our contour lines. So the first thing we want to do is just kind of clean things up a little bit. So we'll expand the surfaces. We have the DEM surface already, but we're just going to kind of turn it off, turn the display off here, turn the surface style to no display, just to kind of clean things up. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we want to remove basically all unnecessary layers here. And there's a couple ways to do that. One, we could do it manually, and we could come up here to the turn layers off button and click each one individually. And I think that's actually what we're going to do here. The other way is you can come into the layer properties and then just turn all these off. I'm not 100% sure which ones these are, so the easier way is just to come in and turn them off manually. So basically anything that's not a contour line, we're just going to click on and it's going to turn them off. Okay, so I know this is a little bit monotonous and slow, but sometimes it's a little bit easier. So here's our fence lines, our road lines. And again, this wouldn't be a huge deal if you left some of these in here, because when you go to make a surface, any polyline that doesn't have an elevation basically won't be used, because AutoCAD can't figure out what to do with it. So there's the abutments. Just do maybe a couple more here. One more. Okay, so now we're basically left with our 1 foot and 5 foot contour lines. So we'll hit escape, clear out of that. So now we're basically down to our polyline features. So again, let's just right click on there, and I think we can just type properties and pull up the properties. So what I wanted to show you is here it's a polyline, but what makes it a contour essentially that we can use for a surface is that it has an elevation associated with it right here. And so for each of these there should be an elevation. So now what we want to do is to create a surface, and again the same way we created our DEM surface, we want to right click surfaces and then just create a generic surface here. And again, this will be kind of the holding space for the surface that we need to define. So we'll come up here and label it just topo survey. We'll have our 1 and 5 foot contours. And again, we want a 10 surface. We created the DEM as a 10 surface as well, and in that way we can combine them in a later step. Now that we have created our generic surface over here named topo survey, we want to actually define it based on our polyline contours here. So we need to come expand down here again to the definition before we click the DEM files. Here we're wanting to click contours, so we right click, select to add. So we can add a description. We'll just again call this topo. You can look into these different weeding factors. I like to keep mine 5 feet, and I'm just going to click all of these here, just how to minimize the flat areas. So, and click OK. And now we have our little selection box and we can select contours. So we want to just highlight everything here and then right click to hit OK. So generally you may see a few errors, and sometimes most of these are fine, and a lot of times it's just the fact that there are duplicate labels within here. So here's a couple break lines that weren't added. Nothing big, or it could be something that we left a couple layers in there, a couple features that didn't actually need to be in there. Okay, so now we have our surface. You can see kind of underneath the red and black contours There's some gray or white in here, and then there's some weird contours out here, and then we have our green kind of bounding polygon. So one thing to note here, so essentially we do have a surface, but if you zoom in, you can kind of tell that we have areas up here that aren't part of our original survey. So we surveyed up here and we surveyed over here, but we didn't survey over here, and essentially what it is doing is taking kind of a bounding polygon and then interpolating these out based on how it thinks it should be. But again, we don't have data to support this, and so we need to basically clip that out. One way to do that is to create a boundary polygon that we can use to define the area that our surface wants to be set to. So to do that, I'm just going to come up here and just select just a random layer here that we can use so we can differentiate, and we're just going to make a polyline feature. So we're not going to be super specific about this. We'll turn the snap off for right now. And we're just going to kind of come in here based on our extent to some degree and just kind of work our way around. I'm trying to stay obviously within the boundaries of both the green rectangle and our data. So let's scooch over here, and we'll kind of finish up working back around. So, and then we'll turn snap back on to snap at this point, right click, enter, and close it out. Okay, so now we have our boundary line. So what we can do here now is, again, within our topo survey surface, we can select boundaries and right click and hit add, and it wants us to name it. It doesn't really have to be anything. We'll call it topo boundary. You hit OK, and we're just going to come find it, click it, and now our surface is limited to within this boundary. To show you that, we can come in and turn these two contour layers off. We can find them here. I believe it's CTR. Yeah, CTR and CT index. Okay, so now this is our actual surface we've created. Again, with 1 foot and 5 foot contours. And it should be almost exactly the same as what we had already for our contours, just a little bit of flat area minimization. And then again bounded now by this polyline that we set. So that's the end of this video on making a surface from contour lines.